Hello, thank you for joining me from wherever you are, whether you're sitting in your car commuting to or from work, at the gym working out, maybe you're still at work, listening in your cubicle, you're on the subway. I see you there, and thank you for joining. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of Bookshelf Brilliance, where timeless knowledge meets modern insight. So this is our debut episode, so you really don't know what to expect. So let me kind of set the scene on what I hope to accomplish with not just this episode, but with our episodes going forward. So here, we're on a mission to unlock classic wisdom, one chapter at a time. But what exactly does that mean? That means I'm going to do the heavy lifting for you. So I've read the book, I've reread each chapter. I had my trusty red pen out while I was doing this, and then I give it another pass once more before I get this episode together, and that allows me to give you the 411, which I can't believe I just said that because I'm really dating myself there. Anybody whose birthday year starts with 2000 doesn't probably understand what that means. But let me stop going on a tangent there. Essentially, my goal is to help you reach the finish line with ease by crafting episodes that break down the key takeaways from each chapter so you can readily put them into action. And speaking of chapters, our first book is a true classic that you've probably heard about more times than you can count. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. The first chapter is one of the better named chapters in the book. I just think it's a little catchy there, but he starts off strong out of the gate, Dale, and I'm calling him Dale as if we drink beers together every Friday night. Obviously, I've never had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Carnegie, but the chapter's title is If You Want to Gather Honey, Don't Kick Over the Beehive. So, enough of me rambling, and let's just dive right in. So, what's this chapter all about? What is, don't kick over the beehive if you're trying to get honey, mean? It focuses on criticism and really our ability to be really good at criticizing other people. Carnegie writes, any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, and most fools do, but it takes character and self-control to be understanding and forgiving. Let us ask ourselves, does criticism work? Does criticism persuade anybody that they're wrong? Turn on the nightly news. Turn on the debates in a couple months' time now. R's versus D's, conservatives versus liberals. Does anybody get anywhere by this constant criticism of one another? The person we are going to criticize or condemn is probably just going to justify themselves, defend their actions, right? The first thing they're going to do is get defensive. And they're going to condemn us in return. They're going to attack. Criticism is often futile as it puts the other person on the defensive. Picture this, you're driving to wherever. You're on the road and somebody cuts you off, and that pisses you off. Pisses us all off, even though we do it all the time, right, to other people. But we may lift up a certain finger at this person, honk our horn, right? Makes us feel better. We're criticizing them. They have to feel bad for this injustice they did. But in that moment, they're going to defend their action. They're thinking to themselves, I got to get my kid to school. My kid's late to school. Or I have to use the bathroom. I'm just trying to get home. I've been out of the house since 6 a.m. and now it's 8 o'clock at night. I'm just trying to get home. Which leads us to the underlying theme of this chapter. Criticism puts a person on the defensive. So you should avoid it if you want to win friends and influence people. Carnegie starts this chapter off very interestingly as he's trying to show us a point that people don't criticize themselves for anything, no matter how wrong it may be. So he really uses some good examples of some really low-life individuals. One of them, the most notorious, Al Capone, who thought of himself as a public servant, right? So he defended all of his actions and took no responsibility for anything. A lot of the time, wrongdoers, Even in instances when they know they're wrong, they tend to blame everybody but themselves. And that's just human nature. It was even human nature for Abraham Lincoln, one of the best leaders that we've ever known in this country. Lincoln did it a lot early in his career, even as he was, highly educated. He was a practicing lawyer, right? And he would anonymously, and I'm air quoting that, publish, attacks against some of his opponents until one time somebody called him out on it, and they challenged him to a duel. Luckily, it never happened, and it did teach Lincoln a very valuable lesson that he carried with him throughout the rest of his life, and probably turned him into the great leader that he was. When people spoke harsh about the people in the South, people doing, despicable things, right? Slavery, we all know it's bad. Even to Miss Lincoln, he would defend them, saying, don't criticize them. They are just what we would be under similar circumstances. So Lincoln did a lot of what Carnegie's teaching to this day, right? Carnegie went back, looked at people like Lincoln to teach to folks like us what to do. Is he tried to put himself into the position of other people to understand them. Lincoln knew that criticism would relieve his feelings, right? And, you got to just blow off some steam, but it will make the other person get defensive, right? And he really practiced what he preached, even on the biggest of stages during the Civil War. After the battle at Gettysburg, they had Lee and the Confederate Army backed up to the Potomac River that was swollen and flooded, and they had no escape. So he ordered his General Meade to attack. No war council. Let's go. Let's end this war. Instead of listening, Meade did the exact opposite. His delay allowed the water to recede, and Lee and his army were able to cross. Lincoln put himself in Meade's shoes. Lincoln wasn't out there fighting battles, seeing men die in person, and maybe that caused the hesitation by Meade. If he condemned him, that would arouse hard feelings, impair all his further usefulness as a commander, and perhaps force him to resign from the army, which is something Lincoln didn't want. Instead, he backed his general, and we all know how that turned out. The Confederate lost the war, and Lincoln and the North prevailed. To round out the chapter, Carnegie brings in a story, Father Forgets, that really hit home for me as I'm raising a little girl. She's 4. She'll be 5 in just a few months. How time flies. But it's getting to an age where it's, very frustrating, and it's very easy for me to lose sight of, how little she is and how frustrated she equally is in that moment, right? And Father Forgets is a story about a father who really does a great job of, belittling his child and, humiliating him in front of his friends, to say the least, right? And I'm going to read a little passage from this, and is, what has habit been doing to me? The habit of finding fault, of reprimanding. This was my reward to you for being a boy. It was not that I did not love you. It was that I expected too much of youth. I was measuring you by the yardstick of my own years. And I really love that last line, so I'm going to read it again. I was measuring you by the yardstick of my own years. And, yes, we could take that in the literal sense, right? It's a father talking to his son. Obviously, he's lived, much more than the little boy, right? Kids will be kids, right? They're learning on the fly, right? They don't know their ass from their elbow, to say the least. But us, we know better, right? Or we should know better. But we're often judging others based on our yardstick. So we have a different perspective. We have different life experiences that make us understand a certain situation. And like I said, we're all just trying to do the best that we can. When dealing with people, we must not forget that these are people of emotion. They have their own prejudices, and they're motivated by their own self-pride, by their vanity, right? Nobody wants to look stupid or to feel stupid. So if we must criticize, why don't we start with ourselves? Take a look in the mirror and dig ourselves. Because it'd be a lot more profitable than trying to change other people and improve them. Let's improve ourselves. Now, to bring us home, let's recap. Let's summarize what we've learned and see how we can put this all into action going forward. I know when I first read this, a lot of it goes against our human nature. We are so ready to criticize others, to take the blame from ourselves and pass it and assign it onto someone else. And selfishly, that may make us feel better in the moment, but it hurts us in the long run, especially if we're looking to have a beneficial relationship with the person that we intend to criticize. Next time you disagree with somebody and you want to give it to them, you want to let them know that they're incorrect or that the way they acted was wrong. Instead of condemning them, why don't we try to understand them, to put ourselves in their shoes, right? We all know that phrase. Don't judge somebody unless you've walked a mile in their shoes. Much easier said than done, but we are learning, we are trying to improve ourselves. So let's start to measure people using their yardstick instead of our own. We must learn to bite our tongue when we want to call out faults in others. If Al Capone can justify his actions after literally committing multiple murders, what do you think the guy who just cut you off is going to do? Let us learn the lesson of not criticizing the easy way, as it took Abraham Lincoln the hard way. It took him almost losing his life to understand not to kick over the beehive if you want some honey for your tea. God himself doesn't propose to judge a man until the end of his days. So why should you and I? Let us be understanding like Lincoln. Let us avoid regret like the father from Father Regrets. Now that we've learned Principle 1, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Thank you for spending your precious time to hang out with us. And don't forget to subscribe wherever it is that you get podcasts so that you don't miss our next episode on Chapter 2, The Big Secret of Dealing with People. Follow us on Instagram at bookshelf_brilliance. Email us anytime at bookshelfbrilliancevm@gmail.com. And yes, please subscribe. Let us know what you think. I can't wait to hear from you.